All right, so I'm going to get to it. But in a moment, I'm going to tell you why this message. Why this message at this time? I think it's a timely message for where we're going. And I'll speak more to this in a moment here. But first, a verse. This is our launch point. Let the word of Christ dwell in you richly in all wisdom, teaching and admonishing one another in psalms and hymns and spiritual songs, singing with grace in your hearts to the Lord. And this is the part where it gets juicy. So you get a sense this is all about the Lord, encouraging one another, the sense of community. And whatever you do in word or deed, do in the name of the Lord, giving thanks. So whatever you do in word or deed. Now, I've got to be honest with you. I have my own Jim interpretation of word or deed. And this is I think my go-to, and I'm sure this is just kind of a selfish nature of mine. I think of word or deed is that anything that's intentional for the Lord. I'm going to go tell somebody about the Lord, that's word or deed. That's my word, and then my deed is going to do it. Or if I'm doing a good deed or a good thing, if I'm in ministry, that's a deed. Word is where I really get hung up. And actually, it's in word and deed because I know it means so much more than just the things I say intentionally for the Lord. It's anything that I do, whatever you do in word or deed. Whatever I say and whatever I do. Whatever I say and whatever I do. This is much more real. So it's whatever I say. When I'm crabby, it's whatever I say. And if it's something I do, it's, hopefully I do it with a good attitude and I do it right. And I don't do it like, it's whatever I say or do. It's anything. It's just all encompassing. And the reason why I kind of hang up on this is, I don't know about you, but sometimes I fight with people. I have a disagreement. Maybe not a fight, but I disagree with somebody or they disagree with me. And there's conflict. You know what I'm talking about? So when I think of word or deed, the words that I say and how I manage that conflict. Have you ever been in conflict, or am I the only one in the room? Okay, obviously we've all been in conflict. So when you're in conflict with somebody, do you want to manage your words? Not so much, we don't want to. We really want to tell them what we're thinking. You're wrong. You know what I'm talking about. You want to give a piece of your mind. A little bit of the mental action. So this morning I'd like to speak on conflict. And I'd like to look at conflict really, simply we're going to get to the point of resolving it. And it could, we're not going to focus on some of these conflicts that happen when we're children, but really as communicators, how we manage and make our conflict hopefully go away. Two reasons I want to speak on this topic today. The first, we are going someplace as a congregation. We have very intentional goals, even in the first half of this year, specifically to connect. Now, it's part of our vision statement to connect with people. And I mean connect. I don't mean like a hi, how do you do? But I mean a connect. And we believe in it so much so that we're sponsoring a bowling time. And we're sponsoring a time to go to the garcade, and we want to build these things outside. We have a whole vision drive. It's not we might call it a pledge drive, but don't you think it's so much more? This is a chance we're sowing money in for the second time in the history of our congregation. We're having a big drive financially to say, yeah, we want to invest in community spaces outside because we want to connect. This is really big. We believe in connecting, and being in a community together is very important. So if we have conflict in the community, that's not good. And knowing how to process conflict, so if it comes up, because it will come up. Conflict always comes up. It's the nature of being alive, yeah? If we're around somebody else, there's going to be conflict at some point with somebody else. That's what we do as people. We have conflict. So how do we process it? If we're trying so hard as a congregation to go this way and to build community and really connect with each other so that we can equip and so that we can impact, if we're going to do that, what happens when conflict comes? So that's the first reason I want to speak in conflict. The second reason I want to speak in conflict, I think the timing is remarkable to deal with this. Really, tomorrow is Martin Luther King Day. And I just want to, he was really a remarkable man. And it's interesting, we can learn a lot about Martin Luther King if we read about him, right? Things, or we watch videos or movies about Martin Luther King. We can also learn about Martin Luther King from all the people who are around him. And I think that's where more of the testimonies come about Martin Luther King. Personally, struck with that. I've learned a lot about Martin Luther King by reading Billy Graham, who had these slices and views of Martin Luther King. So here's a man who lived, and he had a terrible topic. I mean, especially in the Deep South, all over America, but especially in the Deep South, this terrible topic, discrimination, the things that were going on, these two water fountains. I mean, fundamental things, bad things. Bad things, and we know what they are. So when he took it on, he and his group, and I'm talking to people who were really in his group, they got together and they came up with a plan to do it, to take this on and to protest. And what a blessing we live in America, we can protest legally. You know, we have an expression, American citizens can protest. So they got together and they wanted to create a protest, but they didn't want it to be a violent protest. And they trained themselves. They actually trained themselves how to be non-violent protesters. There was contemporaries of the time that didn't train themselves. In Martin Luther King's time, that didn't take the time to do it in a non-violent way. But Martin Luther King led a non-violent way, and it really got people's attention. You know, recently, well, we can have protests all the time. In the last year, there's been protests that have been remarkably violent. And the violence and protest is to the moon. It seems like it's growing more and more, but Martin Luther King didn't lead that kind of protest. Something else that stands out about that time, not only was he managing conflict in a way that was not about violence, he was very good about communicating what the violence or what his protests were about. We all remember, in fact, I know they teach in schools today, and we remember the I Have a Dream speech. He stands up at the mall in Washington, D.C., that long way, and he's facing the Capitol, and he speaks, I have a dream. And we look at this speech today, all these years later, we go, wow, that's a remarkable speech. So it's something to be mindful of. We can have conflict, but there's a right conflict too. How we manage the conflict is what's important. 3 reasons that I think we need to manage conflict, beside the 2 reasons I shared for the message today. The first reason is the Bible tells us to. God doesn't want his people to be stuck in conflict. He wants us to try and process through the conflict. The Bible's clear on that. Another reason that we need to, the Bible wants us, or that we need to manage conflict, and this is probably more of a duh moment, but it's a good reason to manage conflict, is because it's better to live at peace with people than it is to live in conflict with people. The scriptures say that, behold how good and how pleasant it is, and brothers dwell together in unity. There's something about it. And the final reason that it's good for us to manage conflict, and this is going to sound pretty basic and maybe a repeat message for you long-term anchorites, but it is connected to our brand statement. We are to be known, believers, people who follow the Lord are to be known by their love, by their agape. It's very difficult to be in conflict and demonstrate agape at the same time. Very difficult. So if we're to be known by this love, this particular agape, this selfless love, it's very difficult to be selfless in love and hold up our own self for conflict. Because conflict a lot of times just represents us. Yeah? It's in the Word, one of the things that and this is really a big deal for me, what I'm saying. This is like a big slice in how I look at the Bible and how I look at my faith through the Scriptures. This really is. The Lord speaks to me through these things quite a bit, and when I read the Scriptures, I look for this stuff. I like the humanity in the Scriptures. I'm really drawn to people just being people. And sometimes you look at the Bible and everybody seems so Teflon, so amazing, so pious, so holy. And there's one of the things we do as humans in this era is we'll slap a title on somebody who's died years ago. We may call them a saint or something like that. We view them in this amazing, pious way. But the reality is in the Scriptures, a lot of these people were really just very normal. For example, Elijah, the Scriptures say about him, he was a normal man. If I read the life of Elijah, there's nothing normal about it at all to me. But then I go, I know God calls them normal. If that's normal, if God can do what God did with Elijah's life as a normal man, what can he do with my life? Because I think I'm really normal. That's inspiring to me. You may think I'm abnormal. I don't feel that way. I identify more normal. But that's my truth today. I see other things in the Scriptures, humanity of Scriptures, and I find it very comforting. I also find it very challenging because I know the people in the Scriptures, like Elijah, didn't dwell in his normalcy. He pursued God, and God did what God did in his life. And I see these other people who may have made epic fails, but they persevered with God, and God just blew right through those fails and made them what they are today. I am sure there's people in this room who have made fails in their life. Persevere with God, and you just leave that stuff behind. Okay, the reason why I say all that is I want to just give you some examples of conflict in the Scriptures because I think there's unbelievable normalcy in this, and I believe probably I'm going to hit an example that every single person in the room can identify with at some point, but it's already in the Scriptures. Cain and Abel. There's a conflict. Well, at least it was for one person. These two brothers, they make these offerings to the Lord, and one is good, Abel's is good, and Cain's is not as good. You know, it's fine. It's whatever, not as good. So Cain, decides to off his brother. Fratricide, killing a sibling is not good, but that's conflict. And Cain had a very human response to seeing his brother do something so well. Of course, he didn't handle it well. King David, the mighty King David, of David and Goliath. He's King David, the hero who did that. You put his sword in his hand, he's amazing. As a parent, he's abysmal. His parenting skills were very, very weak. And if we had the time, we could go back and we look at some of them. He was a conflict-avoidant parent. The Scriptures are clear in that. One child in particular, the Scriptures specifically spell out, he never told his son, it was a son, he never told his son anything, that he never corrected his son once. And I think, how did I do with my kids? How did I do with my kids as I look at my kids? He was conflict avoidant. And parents, sometimes they don't want to deal with their kid conflict, or maybe it's in the other side, they over deal with their kid's conflict. He did have a mess too, didn't he? He had one son rape one of his daughters. That's terrible. He had two sons try to usurp him. One son tried to kill him. One son that tried to kill him also killed his brother for raping her sister. It's a mess. And I wonder, had David gotten in there and just dealt with conflict, I wonder if things would have gone better. I wonder if some of those things could have been avoided. Jacob and Esau, two times Jacob, really got Esau. One time he took his blessing, one time he took his birthright. And I can't imagine what Esau thought of his brother Jacob. They're siblings. I can't imagine. At one point, Jacob was really fearful for his life. He thought Esau was going to kill him. And he thought, well, I've done all this to him. He's going to kill me now. Man, you really did do some stuff to him. But that's conflict that was in Esau and Jacob's life for a long time until God got in there and did what God did. Ministry. Food distribution to the widows. I've talked about this in the past. There's a group of Hebrews. This is Acts 6. A group of Hebrew-speaking widows. There's a group of Greek-speaking widows, and they would get food distributed to them. They're widows, and the early community of faith, the early believers, would share food. And the Hebrew-speaking widows were getting more than the Greek-speaking, right? And it had to be resolved. There was all kinds of stuff going on, and I shared a bit about this last week. But that is definitely conflict in the community of faith. Paul and Barnabas, they were two good friends. Barnabas actually mentored Paul in the Scriptures. There was a time where Barnabas realized that Paul was earnest to follow God, so he brought him under his wing, so to speak, and mentored him. And so these two men grew up, they're titans in the faith. I was trying to think in America, what would it be like in our country if we had two titans who were amazing together, and then they just disagreed with each other over a topic. And it was a godly topic, and I believe that neither one was wrong, really. They just disagreed over this topic. It wasn't a sin topic. Should this guy travel with him, John Mark? I couldn't think of anybody in America that would be a good illustration for that. I thought, well, who would it be? And maybe Trump and Musk, whether you like them or not. You know, these two are kind of titans in our country right now. What about religiously? I don't know, you know. But it was like that for the believers. They were two titans of the faith. And all of a sudden there's a separating, and they wouldn't travel together. Good news is, they didn't let the conflict stop them. We know they got along fine later on. They just didn't travel together after that. But they did get along. Paul had to correct Peter. Peter was the senior in the faith. He was a believer longer. Paul was a junior. But Peter kind of lost his courage, really. As a Jew, it wasn't before the practice was in those days, Jews couldn't eat dinner with Gentiles. They couldn't eat meals with Gentiles. They wouldn't tolerate that for all kinds of reasons. So later on, as a believer, Peter gets this vision. He realizes that it's okay to do things with Gentiles, to bring faith, to eat with them, and all kinds of other stuff that he could do with Gentiles. And it was a radical shift for the Jews who were following Jesus. So Peter was the first guy to get the vision. But later on, sometime later, probably a number of years later, really, Peter was working with a group of Gentiles, and some Jews came in the scene. And Peter started acting Jewish again. He wouldn't eat with the Gentiles again. So Paul heard about this. Paul's like kind of a skull cracker, you know. So Paul went and corrected Peter publicly and said, that's inappropriate conduct. You can't separate like that anymore. God's released you. Those are my words, but that's a conflict that was dealt with. Elisha was mocked by some youth. That's a kind of a conflict. You know, sometimes people make fun of us as believers. He wasn't made fun of for being a believer, but he was mocked. They said, go on up, you bald head. Go on up, you bald head. Apparently, the youth had a problem with bald heads. I don't know. So Elisha cursed them, and 2 she-bears came out and mauled 42 of them. Don't you want to do that to somebody? Like if they cut you off and just see what happens? It's kind of a conflict. Joab and Abner were 2 friends. And Abner, for whatever reason, it was a divided kingdom of Israel, and Abner was in one half, but they were friends. And Abner later, in self-defense, there was some fighting going on, and Abner killed Joab's brother. And he never forgot about it. Joab never forgot about it. So years later, David sent Joab to broker a peace accord on behalf of the divided kingdom, to bring the kingdom of Israel back together as one kingdom again. Do this for the whole country. And he said, you know, Joab, you go and you represent the army, and you talk to Abner, who represents the army on the other side now, and you make this happen. So Joab gets his chance, and he just goes and kills Abner, who thought he was coming in peace. That's conflict. I mean, there's big conflict. It's a time like this where I think, someday we're going to get to heaven, you know, or whatever this is. The scriptures talk about the gates of heaven. They're made out of pearl. And I've shared this. I just am very mindful of it. I think conflict is a good time to be to recognize the pearly gates of heaven that the Bible tells us about. They're made of pearl. Pearl is the only item. It's generated because of conflict. In that oyster's mouth, there's a bit of sand or whatever micro things get in there, and the oyster produce this coating over it so that sand isn't an irritant, and it can be bigger and bigger and bigger, and eventually it becomes a pearl. And when that oyster is harvested, the pearl's taken out, it's all done. It doesn't have to be polished. It doesn't have to be cut. It doesn't have to be shaped in any way. It's all ready to go. It comes out, and then if it's, you know, what they're looking for, they put it on a necklace or earrings or a crown or however they want to do it. But it's all ready to go. But it's the conflict that shapes the creation of the pearl. It's the conflict that does it. And I think of the pearly gates in heaven, and you know what? I don't think it's an accident that the gates are made of pearl in heaven. I think it's one way for us to realize that when we go to heaven and we walk through these pearly gates, we're walking through the recognition of conflict. We persevere through conflict to get to where we're going. That pearl. So, we know that we're going to move forward as a congregation and really work on the connect. So when conflict comes up, what do we do? How do we navigate it? Honestly, we know this. We don't have enough time to talk about all the ins and outs and all the theories and methods and what could happen and what couldn't happen. But there are some overarching things that are very applicable, and they are the big, heavy-hitting steps to do. The first, know this, my dear brothers and sisters. Let every person be quick to listen, slow to speak and slow to anger, for human anger doesn't produce the righteousness of God. Proverbs 18, a fool finds no delight in understanding, but only in expressing his opinion. You know, the people that want to talk all the time, they don't really want to listen, they just want to talk. Listening is humongous. Listening is a massive piece. I heard a story, I believe it to be a true story, but I don't recall who the two chief players are in the story, who the primary players are. During the time of the American-Indian Wars, that's what the history books will call it, Native American Wars. I don't know. Not looking to offend anybody here. Although my family is Native American. I said Native American in Nepal. I said, my family is Native American. This was in March last year. And they just looked at me. They don't know what a Native American is. So I asked Mamata, our friend, who's come here from Nepal to visit, and she said, what's Native American? I said, you don't know? And I said, what is this person? And I asked her, what is somebody who's lived in the land? You know, their ancestors that lived in the land before other people came to the land. What would you call that? She said, oh, we call that indigenous. There you go. Indigenous. So the story goes like this. There was a soldier, an officer, a younger officer, a little less experienced, meeting with a tribal chief representing his people from whatever region of the country they were in, and they were starting to broker peace. So the officer sits down at the table, so to speak, wherever they met, and this tribal chief sits down at the table, and he's ready to go. And it was a soldier who called the meeting. So the soldier starts to talk. Blah, 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 blah. This is what peace is, blah, 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 blah. This is what we want you to do. This is what we'll do, blah, 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 blah. You get the idea. And the Indian chief is just staring. Not saying a word, not a word. And the soldier would say, well, what do you think about this? And the chief wouldn't reply. And the soldier would say, what do you think about that? And the chief wouldn't reply. And the soldier starts to think, well, what's wrong with this? So he asks his translator, because they're doing all of this through a translator, he asks the translator, what's wrong with this guy? You know, why is there no interaction? I'm asking him questions. He's not even answering me. And the translator said, it's because he respects you so much. He's listening to every single one of your questions, every single thing you say, so that he can go and formulate answers and come back and tell you his well thought out answers. Wouldn't that be something if we had listening like that? If we take the time to say, okay, and we ask questions, because that's good listening, to ask questions. And we sit on it, and we stew on it, and we really listen to the issue through the heartache. And we listen to the person through the heartache. Listening is one of the overarching skills. Really good listeners, and studies show this is not according to Jim. There's all kinds of studies that reinforce this. If somebody's a good listener, it hides weaknesses that they have in other areas. For example, really good listeners are oftentimes seen as more intelligent than they really are. You fake them well if you just listen. Want to seem really smart? Listen. What's really interesting is if somebody has a high IQ, they often don't listen well because they know where the conversation's going. So how do we manage our listening? Listening is, it's one of the great acts of kindness. It's absolutely selfless to be a good listener, to say, I'm going to lay aside my own agenda, and I'm going to give them this time to really listen to them. It's a very selfless thing to do. It's a very agape kind of thing to do. So if we want to develop our agape, that we do it by listening. One other thing that's interesting about listening, and there's all kinds of evidence for this, I mean really listening, is it develops patience. Do you know, and sometimes there's a joke, but I've known people to actually believe what I'm going to say. There's a statement out there, and maybe you've heard it, that people will say, don't ask God for patience because he'll give you trials. How many of you heard the statement? Don't ask God for patience because he'll give you trials. Now, there are people who actually believe that. The only way that you develop patience is through trials. Want to develop patience? Just listen. If you're a good listener, it actually develops our patience. That's not a trial. Well, depending on the topic. Maybe if you're talking about politics, it could be a trial. If you want to develop your patience, be a good listener. Push your agenda aside and listen. It's powerful. And if you need time to formulate a response, then say, give me a day, and I'll give you a response. Give me 2 days. But put a timeline in your response. What's scary is these responses that take months. Have you ever had anybody bring a grievance to you years after the grievance? You really offended me back in August of 1994. I'll never forget that day. And you're like, what are you talking about? 1994? I wasn't even hardly here, you know? But they bring these old grievances. Well, listening can be like that as well, where somebody says something, and yeah, I'll get back to you. And then crickets for the next 6 months. If you're going to get back to somebody, get back to them. Get on it. So that's listening. Number 2, all a man's ways are pure in his own eyes, but Adonai, the Lord, weighs the motives. This is a standard staple for us here. If you're here long term, you'll hear us talk a lot. Don't judge motives. This is a big deal in relationships. If you want to put counselors out of business, don't judge motives. I have a master's degree in clinical counseling. And I don't counsel now, but I have counseled, and I can't tell you how many times in counseling people will come and say, I know why my wife always does this. I know why my husband always does this. No, you don't. Only God judges motives. Only God judges the heart. Only God looks at the inside. Sometimes I don't even know what I do. Why did you do this? I don't know. And you know what I'm talking about, don't you? Have you ever done anything and you're like, I don't know why I did that. I just did it. Now, most of the time we think, I'd like to think we have an answer for why we do what we do. But we don't always know. Sometimes it just is. So it's amazing to me. Why did you do that? I don't know. And somebody else will say, well, I'll tell you why you did it. Well, if I don't know, how do you know? But they do. They'll come in and they'll tell us why anyway. Do you know what I mean? You know those people that want to tell us why we do what we do? We don't know it. We don't know why anything. My wife and I, we've been married for at least 3 years now. And I don't know why she does everything she does. I have to ask her, why do you do what you do? And she usually says something like, because you're so special to me. We have to ask. And it goes back to listening. You see, there's like this little cycle. It's like a spiral of communication, a spiral of relationship building, a spiral of pushing aside our own agenda and being selfless. That's agape. Wouldn't that be a good name for a spiral? I'm living this spiral of agape. Yeah. That sounds kind of weird when I say it out loud. So we don't judge motives. I'll tell you another story. Lady's in an airport. She's going to take a long flight, so she wants to get a snack, the little airport gift shops they have. And she cruises over to one of them. She buys herself a package of cookies. And after she pays for her cookies, she grabs her cookies, her coat, her purse, and all this, and suitcase and all that. And she goes to the waiting area before the flight's called, and she kind of puts everything down. And after sitting there a little while, she thinks maybe she'll have one of those cookies. And as she goes to open up her package of cookies, she realizes the guy behind her is trying to open the package of cookies. She's a hand reaching out, trying to rip open this package of cookies. And she's, this person's taking my cookies. But he opens the cookies and he takes a cookie out and she said, you know what? Fine, he can have that cookie, that I'm going in right after. So she went in and she took a cookie out. Then he took another cookie. She's not gonna, Can't put up with that. So she took another cookie out. He takes a cookie. She takes a cookie. Finally, they're down to one cookie. And she's looking at this going, I can't believe this whole package is just about gone for this last cookie. Sure enough, he reaches out and he takes the cookie. He breaks it in half. He puts half down and he eats half. She thought, well, fine. I guess I'll just have this half a cookie and that'll be that. A few minutes later, her flight is, it's time to board. It's called, board if you're on this flight. And she gets up and she goes in her purse looking for a tissue and she finds her package of cookies. She was eating his cookies, but she was getting mad. You get the idea there. And sometimes, if it's just, had she just turned around and said, excuse me, sir, are those my cookies? It would have saved a lot of heartache, wouldn't it? Although she did get more cookies out of it. I don't know, maybe there's... So we don't judge motives. We judge actions. And I want to be clear in this. Sometimes there's believers that run around, Christians run around, they say, we're not supposed to judge. Are you out of your mind? Of course we judge. There's a book called Judges. Some of you are parents. You judge your kids? I said be home at 10. It's 10:01, but I'm not judging. No, you say it's 10:01. I'm skull cracking. I'm not going to say one of my kids in particular. She liked to test the limits. And I won't say who, but it's my oldest one. And I remember I would sit on the couch so she couldn't get past me. And that was a pretty good tactic. But I just really wanted to know she'd get home safe. But she'd be like, oh, I just lost track of time. I just lost that you have a free day tomorrow. I lost that. It's not free anymore. You're staying home. Yeah, it's Johanna. We judge actions. Could you imagine our legal system if we didn't judge actions? But we don't judge motives. Why did they do what they did? If somebody did something to you, you hash it out, you talk it out. You don't guess why. And finally, put on the full armor of God so that you are able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the powers, against the worldly forces of this darkness, against the spiritual forces. Do you know that sometimes we have conflict because the devil is the devil and he is trying to get us? That is real. Not every time. Yesterday I was driving here, actually, and I was doing, I think so, about 5 or 6 or 7 over, somewhere like that. I'm here in Menominee Falls, and one of Menominee Falls' finest, I see him up in the distance, so I thought, ugh, you know the reaction I'm talking about. You see a cop ahead, and immediately, even if you're not really speeding, you hit the brakes or you slow down, you look highly suspicious. So I did this, and then as I pass him up, then all of a sudden he comes out. I'm like, oh man, he's going to come after me. I'm going to have to tell him my name is Mike Fantry, and we get this whole problem. But sure enough, he's following me, and we have a nice long drive through the country together, so to speak. Eventually we made it here, and then he peeled off as I pulled in the lot. So I see him on his walkie-talkie while we're driving. He could have been talking to his wife. I don't know. But I know that he's on the walkie-talkie, which is not what you want to see when you look in your rear view when some cop's going, you know what I mean? Now, see, I would not call that a spiritual problem. I would call that a natural problem because I was the one driving 5 or 6 or 7 over. Had I gotten stopped, I wouldn't call that spiritual. I know people who will say, oh, I got a speeding ticket. I think the devil's trying to get me. No. It's your right foot that got you. It's not the devil. And had he pulled me over, we would have been right. But it would have been my fault with my right foot. Get the idea? So often we want to blame the devil for everything that happens. People don't pay their bills. It's the devil. No, pay your bills. I've had people say that. They didn't pay their bills and they really thought the devil was trying to get them. That's not the devil. That's between you and your checkbook. That's called a consequence. Some things are consequences. They're good consequences and they're bad consequences. When I was, I think, 19 or so, one of my friends, wasn't really close, but he was one of my friends, he was accepted into Harvard. He had worked hard in school and he did all the right things and he went to Harvard. I would say that's a good consequence for having worked hard in school. But we like to often blame all of the bad stuff on the devil. Our bodies get older. They break down. They don't work the same they did when we were younger. I don't know. For you, your breakdown might be age 19. Maybe your breakdown is age 79. But it's the way of things. It's not the devil. They just break down. But sometimes it is the devil. Sometimes the devil does come at us, like his little spider monkey self. Sometimes he does try to knock us off. And he does try to pull us from the faith. And he does it, he's very experienced at doing it. He's been doing it for thousands of years. He's done it for thousands of people. Too many people probably to count. He does know how to pull us from the faith. He does know how to mess with our lives. And what's interesting is we don't fight the devil with our intellect. We don't fight him with our athletic ability. We don't fight the devil with our musical ability. We don't fight the devil with our artistic ability. Anything that we have in the natural is useless to a spiritual fight. We fight the devil, we fight those things by persevering. In Ephesians 6, this chapter gives us some segments of it. We put on the armor of God to stand against the devil's schemes. That's what we do, which means righteousness. How to be right standing before God. That's one of the ways we fight the devil. We keep ourselves right standing before God. Truth. We always live in truth. When we're having problems with the devil, deception is often a play. We always continue to live a life of truth. I mean the truth, based in the truth. We have a shield of faith. We keep our faith crisp. We don't let it waver. Now, faith in itself is being certain of something. But sometimes people come up with excuses. They'll logicize and they trivialize their own faith. We don't do that. Our faith is a powerful tool. The sword of the Spirit is one of the ways we navigate with the devil. Remember, it's spiritual. So the Spirit is an amazing tool, weapon, on spiritual things. The gospel message. Our feet in Ephesians 6 talk about our feet being covered with the gospel. Remembering what the gospel is, living a life of action toward the gospel. Helps us persevere in those times. We will break through. The devil can't knock us off, but he can sure knock us off spiritually. Knock us out of sync, get us to walk from the ways of the Lord, get us to do whatever. We can't give into that stuff. Sometimes the conflict is spiritual. So when that happens, make sure that you hang in there with the spiritual. Don't give up on the spiritual. Keep your conflict sharp. I'm going to give you one example of a big thing that's a spiritual conflict and the silliness of it. It happened in the 90s. Bill Clinton was president then, and it's interesting that he's starting to produce this more and more. And I've seen a number of videos on YouTube. My brother sent me one. And then I've seen other ones out there, and some interviews. He's becoming very outspoken about this. He's currently really put out with Hamas. And he's speaking up about some of the plighted of the Palestinians. And he's not doing it in a way that's pleasing Palestinians. And it's fascinating because he's a Democrat. And the reason why I'm saying that is that the Democrat Party generally is more supportive of Palestinian causes. But Bill Clinton, as president, is starting to relay the story of what happened to him while he was president in Camp David. He had a special meeting and he asked the leader of the PLO, the Palestinian Liberation Organization. They've changed names. They're still around under a different name now. And then so that was Yasser Arafat. So Bill Clinton, Yasser Arafat from the Palestinian Organization, and the Israeli representative was the Prime Minister of Israel, Ehud Barak. So Barak, Arafat, and Clinton. And they all met to talk about this problem in the Middle East and Israel, how to bring peace between, this centuries-old battle, how to bring peace in the Middle East kind of thing. And if you catch a YouTube video of it with Bill Clinton talking, it's worth it because he says it very, very well. He was in the room. And they had transcribers and then people taking minutes. This is a known thing. They decided that they were going to negotiate. Let's all put everything on the table and let's see if we can't negotiate something. So they negotiate. And Barak from Israel starts to give Arafat, the Palestinian, everything he wants. Gives them half of Jerusalem as a capital, gives them this land for a two-state solution, increases the size of the land 4%. So he's actually adding territory to it. So think about that. They asked for this much. He says, no, I'll give you even more than that. So he puts everything on the table, and the Israeli prime minister agrees. You can have it all. You can have it all. Two-state solution. East Jerusalem, we'll split Jerusalem down the middle. You have half, we'll have half. Everybody's going to live together. It's going to be kumbaya. Bill Clinton is beside himself excited. What president wouldn't want this in their legacy? He has brokered Middle East peace in Israel. This is, what a moment. And Yasser Arafat, no, I don't think so. And he left. It makes no sense. Why did he leave? Do you know they're still asking for the same things that they were offered in the 90s today? Today they're asking for the things that they were offered in the 90s that they had. They could have had all that. Somebody said, why is this? What's the problem? I think it's spiritual. I don't think it has anything to do with peace in the Middle East. I think Israel is in a very, very difficult position and trying to navigate peace to something that's spiritual. And we can't do it through our intellect. We can't do it through our talents. We can't do it through war, through our physical machines. It's a spiritual thing. And we know that things are going to get bad for Israel again. They're going to get bad. The Bible says they're going to get bad. It said they're going to be rebuilt in 1948 after 2,000 years of not being an existing nation. They were rebuilt, and so it lays these things out. It's going to get bad again. And Israel, it's not going to make any sense to the whole world because it's spiritual. Bill Clinton doesn't understand. And if you watch him in these interviews when he's relaying this story, he doesn't understand. Well, some of you have spiritual things in your life that don't make any sense. Don't worry about assessing it as spiritual or not. Just persevere with the Lord. Read your Bible. Pray. Stand true to the Word. Keep coming to services. Keep going to equip groups. Keep going to youth group. Do what you do. You will break through. You will. You will. And then you're going to go, wow, you know what? That was spiritual. Sometimes challenges are spiritual. Do you know we talk here about this. Maybe you're newer, so I'll say this for you. We are physical, we have a soul, and we have a spirit. We are spiritual beings also. And when we give our life to the Lord, that's what we're doing. We're recognizing that. And so much of our life is a spiritual, it's a spiritual journey. People who don't read their Bibles are starving their spirits, so to speak. We recognize that there's a spiritual element to us. When Jesus came here, he came here for our physical body. He came and said, you follow me and I'll take care of all of your needs. He came here to heal our soul, things that go on in our soul, our challenges of life and the things that we navigate there, to align us to know how to follow him. But he also came for our spirit. And he died and he rose and he proved that he can take care of us, all of those things. Conflict, we can't let conflict get in the way of any of this stuff that we have in mind. But if you've never met the Lord, if you've never met and launched a spiritual walk with him, there's a physical side of it too, but we have to take care of our spirit. If you've never done that, dedicated your life to follow the Lord, body, soul, and spirit, give your life to the Lord, ask him to move into your life, then let today be your day. Talk about conflict resolution. Take care of your own life. After service, there's going to be some people up here praying, and they would just love to pray with you, and they'll just pray with you to know how to do it, or come and look for me. And if you don't know the people praying, and if you don't know me, then say hi. Because I will guarantee one of the best things I can ever do with my life is pray for you to align to him. I did that. I made a choice. Most people in this room have made a choice. So let today be your day for choice, that you'll follow him intentionally, by design. You ask him into your life, you make him Lord, and then you move on from there. You follow him. Amen? So please stand up. Let's pray for us. Lord, we do seek you for us. First, Lord, I seek you for all of the people who have not made this commitment with you, that they would find you. Lord, that they would find you the way that I found you. And the way others have found you, Lord, that you take us and you shape us, and you're so good. Thank you for it. Lord, we do pray for all of us, God, that we would have a better sense of conflict and resolving conflict, that we would be good testimonies of you, good testimonies of your way. Lord, that we would be good community builders, that we would live at peace and unity with everybody. Help us, Lord, with conflict resolution. Help us take it on. Help us be good ambassadors for you in this. Thank you for your very goodness, God, bringing us together and teaching us your way. In Jesus' name, amen. May the Lord bless you and keep you. May the Lord make his face shine upon you and be gracious to you. May the Lord lift up his countenance on you and give you peace. Be blessed.
Thank you for joining us for the live stream of this service at Anchor Falls Church. We hope you were blessed and encouraged by the message. We invite you to join us in person in Menominee Falls on Menominee Avenue next Sunday at 10 a.m. For more information about our church and upcoming events, please visit our website at anchorfalls.org. We look forward to meeting you soon and pray you have a blessed week.